And we're live.
Great. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are here for a neighborhood meeting for a proposed development at Bond Farm, specifically 1313 Spruce Avenue in the western part of the older part of Longmont. As by way of introductions, my name is Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson. I'm a senior planner here in the planning department. With us from the city, we have Dallas Stiles, who is going to be running the live stream and will also be facilitating the call-in, keeping us all organized here and on track. We have Jim Angstott, who's our Director of Engineering, Caroline Michael, who is a civil engineer for transportation engineering, Chris Huffer, who is also one of our public works engineers. And then from the applicant team, we have Mark Young, Alex Gore, Jason Buss, Dan Williams, and Brian Horan. So with that, let's go ahead and start my presentation, Dallas. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So just by way of a quick agenda, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the proposal, the zoning, and the general process. I'm going to ask our transportation engineer to provide an overview of what's involved in traffic studies and how required improvements are determined. The applicant will go into greater detail as far as what they're proposing as far as the project. After that, we will open the phone line up for public comment. We do ask that people limit their comments to 3 minutes. We anticipate having quite a few speakers and want to give everyone the opportunity to voice their opinions and ask questions. And then rather than responding to each individual comment, we're going to address them at the end, since I expect there would be some overlapping questions and concerns. And then I will go over the next steps of where we go from here. So next slide. So the current proposal that we're discussing tonight is to amend an existing approved concept plan from 46 units to 46 units that were of a mixture of different types of dwelling units to 75 townhouse units. So tonight is a neighborhood meeting. The way we do things in Longmont is we typically hold the neighborhood meeting in advance of the application submittal. So we do not have a formal application that we are currently reviewing. By having the neighborhood meeting first, it gives the applicant some upfront information about community concerns that will need to be addressed throughout the application process. So next slide. So in terms of location, this particular property is located on the south side of Spruce Avenue, just west of Grant Street and south of where Sherman tees into Spruce. The zoning is residential mixed neighborhood. The total site area is roughly about 5.8 acres overall. The development area is going to be a bit less of that, since there will be 0.85 acres of city park space dedicated to the city. Next slide. So in terms of zoning in this area, the subject property is zoned residential mixed neighborhood, which is consistent, basically everything south of Spruce Avenue for a fairly decent direct amount of to the east and to the west have this RMN zoning. To the north is zone RSF, which is residential single family. Next slide. So I want to just give a quick overview of what these various zoning districts mean, what they allow, etc. So residential mixed neighborhood, it permits roughly, general density range is 6 to 18 units per acre. It allows for a pretty good range of unit types. So it can be single family, either attached or detached. Live-work uses are allowed as what we call a conditional secondary use, co-housing, multifamily, and certain group living uses subject to specific standards. Residential single family, which is north of Spruce, permits 1 to 8 dwelling units per acre, and specifically single family detached, and again, certain group living types of group living uses subject to specific standards. In this particular case, they're proposing a more of a townhome development. I've received quite a few calls and comments and questions about density, and just doing a quick and dirty back of the napkin kind of calculation, taking a look at properties within this area. It looks like most of the area, including the residential single family zoned area north of Spruce, has density that's actually in line with the 6 to 18 dwelling units per acre of the residential mixed neighborhood zone district. There are 5,000 to 7,500 square foot parcels are typical in this area. There are quite a few sub 5,000 square foot lots in the blocks to the north of this property as well. I say that mostly just to give you an idea of scale and in terms of what the existing density is. So next slide. So I touched a little bit on the process. There was a pre-application meeting held in late June for this project, which basically outlined the path for the proposed development project in terms of the review process. The first step is this neighborhood meeting that we're holding tonight. Following this neighborhood meeting, the development team would need to make a formal application to the city to amend the concept plan that basically was because the concept plan is part of the annexation package. This does require city council approval. So there will be a public hearing process for the amended concept plan. So this is not your only opportunity to voice your opinions or ask questions about the project. If the concept plan is approved by city council, this would move to the subdivision plat and site plan review process. That would be the next step. Neighborhood meetings aren't typically required for these types of reviews, but there definitely is notice required in terms of mailed notices and posted signs. It's important to note no building permits are issued until the development plans are approved. So next steps, or next slide, I should say. So I just want to touch a little bit about the history of this property from a regulatory standpoint. It has, been around for quite some time in terms of various applications with the city. So it was originally annexed in 2006 with a residential mixed density zoning. There was a process to rezone the property to a planned unit development, but that was never completed. So because that planned unit development rezoning was never completed, when the citywide rezoning occurred in 2018, this property was rezoned to residential mixed neighborhood as part of that effort. And that really went to consistency with the Envision Longmont comprehensive plan update that had been approved prior to that. Next slide. So I've had a lot of calls and a lot of emails from interested neighbors and community members about this project. Just wanted to touch on just a couple of common themes that I've heard. One question had to do with community character as defined, as our comprehensive plan has policies about that. Ultimately, the applicant is responsible for demonstrating that the property is the project is compatible with the surrounding properties in terms of the land use, the site and building layout and design, access, as well as all of our other review criteria. So they do have to present that analysis with their application, and that is something staff reviews with regard to our adopted standards. The question also came up with the density, and I touched on that previously about the existing density in the neighborhood. What they've proposed, and the applicant will go into more detail as far as specific numbers in their presentation. What they've initially proposed as part of the concept plan does meet the density range that is considered permissible or consistent with that residential mixed neighborhood zone. But again, the applicant will talk a bit more about that in a moment. Historic status came up. We did have some folks come and speak to the Historic Preservation Commission last week asking about how the farmhouse on the property could potentially be saved. There was a cultural survey conducted on this property that determined it is eligible, as far as the historic farmhouse, that it is eligible for listing on the National Register, as well as eligible for designation as a local landmark. It's important to note that except in very, very rare circumstances, we would require that the owner of the property pursue that landmark status. To date, we have not had that happen. I will say, in terms of how a property is landmarked without the owner's consent, there is a process for that. However, because we do recognize private property rights, there are additional criteria to landmark properties without the owner's consent. Specifically, there are 6 additional criteria that are required, so it is held to a higher standard. Obviously, if the owner wanted to pursue that, we'd be happy to talk to them, but that is up to them. So next slide. So I'm going to ask Caroline Michael to touch base on traffic studies and how improvements are identified that are necessary for a project. Traffic impacts have definitely been by far the #1 concern expressed by the community. So I'm going to ask Caroline just to do a quick 101 on traffic studies.
Thank you, Jennifer. So as Jennifer mentioned before, we do our public meetings or neighborhood meetings before a formal submittal. So right now we don't have a traffic impact study for this proposal. What we usually do is we go through a scoping process with the applicant to determine which intersections they need to evaluate or what road segments they need to evaluate. And they determine things like a level of service at these intersections, existing and new proposed accesses, as well as determine needs for improvements like new turn lanes or any new traffic control that might be required. So it will determine most of that in the scoping process. We've also had some previous traffic studies completed for this site, but since it's been a few years and since this is a new proposal, it will require an update.
Great, thank you so much. So the final kind of common question that I wanted to touch base on is funding for the proposed park. There was I received questions as far as whether this park was fully funded by the city. And the answer is there is currently $240,000 allocated towards this park. That was part of the original annexation. The remainder of the park is currently unfunded, and that's really a function of A, priorities, and B, we haven't had a proposal for this property that we could tie into. It's important to note, as far as why this whole property is not going to be a park, the city had first right of refusal to purchase the property at the time it was annexed, and it did refuse to exercise that right, simply because there were just different priorities and different needs in other parts of the city. So we will be working with the city on developing the 0.85 pocket park that will be shown in the concept plan, and that would be a city-owned facility. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and I'm going to turn it over to the applicant team so they can speak in more detail about the project.
Hello, my name is Alex Gore. I'm the architect of the project. I think Dallas is going to bring up our presentation. Awesome. So like I said, Alex Gore of F9 Productions, a local architecture firm here, and I want to walk you through the initial concept that we're pursuing for Spruce Avenue. Next slide, please. So one of the first things for us to kind of lay out is that we are complying with the current zoning. We're not trying to change any zoning rules. We're not trying to change any density or anything like that. So the concept of what we're doing is, again, providing that park to the city. And if anyone remembers the old concept of the old bond farm, we're doing things a little bit different. One, that park used to be, the park that we're using is the same width wide, but up towards the front, towards Spruce Avenue, we actually widened the park so that we'd have a bigger entrance towards the park. And we provided parking there along Spruce Avenue on the park side and in front of the project. Our goal also is, when we do the parking, is to widen the street and to make it uniform across the whole site. As for circulation, we're going to have circulation across the site and then down through the site, and then from east to west, connecting the public park to the site and down to the detention. I've seen one question about water. So the process that the whole development team is going to go in, it doesn't just involve me, it involves civil engineers, landscape designers, structural engineers, and they're accounting to capture and detain water on the site. And also we have a kind of a unique solution too in the kind of lower west corner to make a bigger, more visually friendly part of the park. And that will come on the next slide. So our offices are up on Crispin Drive, and this is right across from our office. And this is actually detention and a playground. So that bigger portion on the south side of the Bond Farm site is something similar to this. I also want you to notice that this is a more dense project than what we're proposing, and this has way more pavement than we're proposing. This is probably an 85% coverage site where we're proposing less than half. Next slide, please. So the density, I want to point out that half of all the land on here is actually either parks, landscape buffers, water detention, sidewalks, or treescapes. So this is kind of rare in a medium or high density. And there's going to be as much actual green landscape that I've seen on any kind of any kind of multifamily development. Next slide, please. And then less than a quarter of it will actually be building footprint. The other thing too, which I think is unique, is that the density allows for around 104 units. And I've worked with many developers from Denver to North Dakota to New Mexico. And the majority of them max out the site, and they have to max out the site because of the land costs and all that. And early on in the process with these developers that I've known for years, they didn't need or want to max out the site, which I thought was refreshing and taking care of the neighborhood. Also, like Jennifer went over, I just put it in some context. There's low density around. We're in the middle density, and we're not even yet in the high density of Longmont, which compared to other cities like Denver or Chicago, Longmont doesn't even have zoning that would touch their high density that would exceed 100 dwelling units per acre. So we're really in the middle to low ground for density. Next slide, please. Also, so we're not doing anything big or huge or out of scale like that. The bottom image that you see is the length of our site. And over 55% of that whole length is open to views or to trees or to landscaping. And then also the height restrictions are 35 feet. And the max that we are proposing right now is 30 feet. And then if you're standing on that site, that's the highest side of the site, and it just goes down from there. So we don't plan on maxing out the site either. Next slide, please. Parking, there's concerns about parking. This development has stricter standards than the previous developments, meaning each of a 3-bedroom unit has to have 2.25 parking spaces per unit. And the 2-bedroom units, excuse me, that we have to have 2 parking spaces per units. But we're not going to have large parking lots or anything like that. Maybe like you saw in a couple slides before, they're going to be within the units. So of the 165 spaces required, we're providing 170 spaces, and 150 of those are actually within the units, and the rest are spread out throughout the site. Next slide, please. Also, I want to emphasize that our firm, our headquarters is in Longmont. I've lived in Longmont. I have property in Longmont. People at our firm live in Longmont, and we care about Longmont. So we want to do the right thing for Longmont. So I went walking along the neighborhood just to get a feel for the kind of the form of what was happening there. And it, as most people know that are watching this, it's a very beautiful neighborhood. And not only was I stricken by the form, but the colors and the gardens and the kayaks and everything that people are doing in the neighborhood. And the project that we're developing is a baby project, and it's going to grow into the neighborhood. The trees are going to grow into the neighborhood. Throughout the walking paths, there'll be benches and little pocket parks and things like that. So our goal is actually to match the context and complement it as much as we can. It is a different type of development. It's not a single family. It is multifamily, which fits the zone that it is in. So it will look different. It can't be the same, but we're going to try to bring those elements in. And right now, preliminarily, this is a neighborhood meeting. What I'm going to show you is just a first stab, a first development that will be iterated out throughout the process. But if you go to the next slide, I want to show you what basically we're considering doing. So this is just one unit. We're going to have up to three. Actually, there's 4 units here, but we'll have 3 different unit types. And we wanted to bring those colors. These colors aren't set in stones, but the pastels in there. I could see where the windows are, that black color matching the color of by the entrance, and really mimicking that form that the neighborhood has as much as we can in a different plan type. Next slide, please. And then here's it going down the hill with it and how it will stagger and bringing that throughout. Next slide, please. To give you a context of what one of those single units will look like, again, in the rear will be where you can enter the garage, so cars will be hidden. Another thing that the developer did too, without maxing out the site, was they went for wider units that are not typically done. And what that's going to allow is for cars to actually park in their garage. So some multifamilies have small garages that you can't even fit cars in. Some neighborhoods, like I live in, people can't park their cars in there. These are wider units allowing for people to park their cars in. So on this level, you have a garage, a bedroom or an office, and a bathroom. If you go to the next slide, we'll see the next level. Basically, this unit is about 1,700 square feet, and there's a couple different units. We haven't developed all of them, but a living room, a kitchen, a dining room, a pantry, and a powder. And then a home office, because a lot of people are working from home these days, if not full-time, at least part-time. And there'll be a window in there too, but we thought that was a nice addition. Next slide, please. And then we have the upstairs, which is 2 bathrooms with a laundry up there, and then the rooftop deck. And on the front of the building, we put that traditional peaked form, not only to kind of set back and provide some privacies, not for only the people buying it, but for the neighborhood too, but to give our development the feel of the neighborhood that it's in. And I believe that is it. I'm just checking my notes. And yes, that is it for what we have. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alex. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dallas, who is going to provide the instructions for calling in.
Sure thing. So we are going to take a 5-minute break here. We do have a lot of people watching right now. As you will see, I am pulling up the call-in information. You can call in here. The number is 1-888-788-0099. You can then enter our meeting ID 839-9277-3949. And we are going to take a 5-minute break here. And once we are back in, we're going to have Jennifer and our applicant respond to your questions. Questions will be limited to 3 minutes, and we will be timing those because we have a lot of folks tonight. We want to make sure that everyone has time to get their questions answered. Thanks, and we'll see you in a few. All right, we're about 30 seconds out from the 5-minute mark. Just wanted to give a heads up to Jennifer and our applicant, as well as any callers that are out there. We're going to continue to leave the slide up for a little bit longer as I write down these numbers, so make sure we have people in the correct order. And we will begin shortly. All right, I'm going to take down this slide. And if you give me just a moment, Jennifer, I will get our first caller here. So caller, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to state your last 3 digits of your phone number. When I call on you, I will ask you to unmute. To do that, you're going to hit *6 on your device. Okay.
And
So
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I'm just gonna reiterate, we are going to hold our responses until after everyone has spoken.
Okay. Sounds good. We will do that. And remember, callers, that you will have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to talk, and then I will let you know when your time is up. So our first caller is the last 3 digits, 336. Caller 336. Would you please unmute? Hit *6 on your device. Hey there, we can hear you. Can you state your name and address for the record?
Our first caller is the last 3 digits.
Yeah, there is a delay.
And do you mind muting your live stream, as I can hear myself right now over your call?
There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry, there was a delay. My name is Lori Martin, and my address is 1301 Spruce Avenue.
Perfect, and go ahead.
So I appreciate the information that you've provided, and I do have questions about density. I know you've addressed some of that, and I'm going to get to that second, because I just want to register that my primary concern about this project is traffic, increased traffic on Spruce Avenue. So one of the things that I love about our neighborhood, we have a 5-year-old, is that we're easily able to walk and bike on the streets. And especially during commute times, there can be a lot of people driving quickly down Spruce Avenue. And sometimes we have to pull to the side. I often have to do this, especially in the morning, to let another car come by. So I don't know your specific plans to address traffic flow and additional traffic coming down Spruce Avenue, but it is a concern of mine. It's probably my biggest concern with this project. And, you know, there have been ideas tossed around about how to route traffic potentially out the south end of the property. So like I said, that is my primary concern, and maybe I'll let someone else who's waiting to speak address the question of density. There's a big difference between 6 units and 18 units per acre. And so I'm just, even though I heard what the architect said, thank you, Alex, for that information about this being a less dense project than it could be, it's just hard for me to visualize how the density of this project, even at 75 units, which is less than the 104 that could be there, is consistent with the density of the neighborhood.
All right, and thank you. We will again be addressing these questions at the end if you want to stick around. If you do have questions later on, you can hit *9 to raise your hand again, but we're going to get through everyone first.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our next caller. Caller with the last 3 digits 934. Caller 934, if you would hit *6 to unmute. Caller with the last 3 digits of your phone number, 934. If you would hit *6 to unmute. Okay, we'll come back to you, 934. Right now, we're going to go on to the caller with the last 3 digits, 083. Caller 083. Oh, hey, 934. Can
Hi.
you state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, I'm Dora Cobb. I live at 118 Lincoln Street.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes begins.
Yeah, so I kind of echo what the previous commenter said, is I'm just really worried about the amount of traffic. We live in a really nice, quiet, walkable neighborhood. Lincoln is pretty quiet. Spruce is probably one of the busier streets, and I'm out walking with my small children as well. And so I'm just really worried about the impact of having, potentially over 100 additional cars parked on our street when, and just coming in and out when, most of the really nearby neighborhood is single family homes where there might be, 1 or 2 cars, maybe 4 cars, but nothing like over 100. So I'm just really worried about, our streets becoming less pedestrian friendly, especially Spruce, where parts of Spruce already don't have a sidewalk. And so it's just adding to it becoming really a car-centric street and harder for those of us who live in the neighborhood that want to just walk with our families. So yeah, that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 083. Caller 083. Will you hit *6 to unmute for me? Caller with the last 3 digits, 083. If you would hit *6 on your device. All right, we're going to move on to our next caller at this time. We'll come back to you. Caller with the last 3 digits, 406. Caller 406. If you would hit *6 on your device to unmute. Caller with the last 3 digits of your phone number, 406. Would you hit *6 to unmute? Thought I saw it there for a second. Caller 406, if you would try one more time, hitting *6. All right, we will keep on going. Caller with the last 3 digits, 616. Caller 616, if you would hit *6 on your device, please. Hey there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Danny Craig and my address is 227 Vivian. You had mentioned that you were going to potentially widen Spruce. I would like to know how you would do that if you would come into people's properties. And then are you going to be doing a traffic study for all the feeder streets that are perpendicular to Spruce from Bowen over to Sunset? And then finally, have you taken a look at the tax burden to our schools? These units seem like they'd be family units with children in our elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And so is that also going to be looked at?
That is all you got. Thank you very much.
You bet.
All right. We are going to go to our next caller. And let's see, my order got a little bit shifted here. Caller with the last 3 digits 663. Caller with the last 3 digits of your phone number 663. Hey there. Can you hear me?
Yes, this is Steve Fritz.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Thank
can
you.
hear you. Do you mind stating your address for the record?
221 Judson Street.
Thanks. Go right ahead.
First question, comment. Will this complex be run under an HOA, and will there be restrictions on ownership in terms of number of units that can be rented out? I just finished 12 years of running an HOA on the east side of town for a condominium complex that had almost at one point 80% rentals and no on-site management, and it's a disaster. So I want to see how you're going to avoid that type of thing here. So that's one. Spruce has already commented on there's no artery feeding this area. Bowen is the closest thing to it. But most traffic here, they use Sunset, and there is right now a problem with Spruce and Sunset. The city recently put up no parking on close to the intersection to keep cars from bumping into each other, but it is what was already described as you have to pull over and let somebody pass through, which means you're going to have to turn Spruce into no parking on one side or both. And I need to know if that's planned, and want you to understand that impacts people. There are townhouses currently on Spruce on the 1200 block. They each have 2-car garages below them. They do not park in them. They park on the street on Spruce. And it is a problem. It's a congestion issue for us. Those are the 2 biggest things. In short, just comment. I think you guys made a mistake paying too much for this property, and you're trying to make us pay for your mistake. I really think someone else needs to eat this. It is just not fitting this neighborhood. It is not a character, even though it's described as other multifamily. You can count them on one hand. There's a 4-plex that's single level. There's a couple of duplexes. There's those townhouses I just described, and that's it. Everything else is single family here. This is not a character by any stretch of the imagination. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we are going to go to our next caller, our caller with the last 3 digits 902. Caller 902, would you hit *6 on your device, please, to unmute? Hey there. Can you hear me? I see you're unmuted, but I'm unable to hear you, 902.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm at 202 Grant Street, kitty corner to the Bond Farm. And my primary concern is echoed by all the people that have just called in, so I'm not going to revamp all of those issues. But in addition to that, I'd like to find out from the developer what the plans are for the Bond Farm home. And if it's going to be relocated to a different location, is it going to be bagged up and sent on a truck so that no asbestos can be spread about the neighborhood? And if it's going to be completely destroyed, how are they planning to do that without infecting the neighborhood with asbestos? That's all that I have. Thank you.
Great. And do you mind stating your name for the record?
Yes, Casey Mazurkowitz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to go on to our next caller now. Caller with the last 3 digits 438. Caller 438. If you would hit *6 on your device to unmute yourself. Caller with the last 3 digits of your phone number 438. would you please hit *6 to unmute? Hey there. I can see you've unmuted 438, but I can't seem to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Would you please hit *6?
I can hear you. Yes. Do you mind muting the live stream in the background?
Hello? Okay, you can hear us?
Yes. And if you wouldn't mind stating, oh, nope, I can still hear myself in the background if
Okay,
you don't mind.
can you hear me?
Would you please hit *6? I can hear you. Yes. Do you mind muting the live stream in the background?
Okay, you can hear us?
Yes. And if you wouldn't mind stating, I can still hear myself in the background.
Okay,
if you don't mind.
can you hear me? Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Do you mind stating your name and address for the record,
I
please?
can't hear you very well, but that's okay. So my first question was, I did a little
Before you
research.
begin, do you mind stating your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Ellie Sierra, and I live at 328 Sherman Street on the
Thank you
other
very much.
side of Third. And one thing to just regarding traffic is right now we're dealing with Third Street and with transportation about the through corridor of Third and the problems that that's having. So that's just one piece. The other thing is I've been looking into who is Aspen Property Group 2. And I would like to know who these people are, because you try to go online and you don't find very much. And what have they done prior to this? How are they connected to communities and neighborhoods? So I would like to know. Wolf, my husband, wanted to ask, why the change of zoning from the original annexation? And getting back to the traffic study, and I know that needs to happen, but we need to, it really needs to look at trips per family, how many cars we're talking. If we're talking 75 units, we're talking ×2 for vehicles. That's a lot of vehicles.
Concern on Spruce and Sunset.
Especially Spruce and Sunset. And compatibility to the neighborhood. That is really huge. And what I could just see from his little slideshow, that doesn't look compatible.
Environmental?
And will there be an environmental impact study done? Right now it's green space, bordered by a farm to the west, down below, and that has to do with all the drainage issues as well. Anything else, Melissa? That's it.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go back to the top with some folks we missed a second ago. Caller with the last 3 digits 083. If you're there now, do you mind hitting *6 to unmute? Hey there, can you hear me?
My name is Tom Walther, 1305 Spruce Avenue. And my concern is that the Bond Farm property is unique in that it's surrounded on all sides by mature, settled, quiet neighborhoods where human beings currently live. And there, at this time, is no means of entering the property that can accommodate 75 new households. We actually have crowded, narrow streets that all construction vehicles will have to come down, and that once we have a couple hundred or 100 plus new cars in the neighborhood making maybe 2 trips a day, they will also have to pass on those narrow streets. So it looks to me like the infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure in particular, for the project is not yet in place. And regardless of what happens on the Bond Farm property, it's still not in place because all vehicles are going to have to come through the neighborhood from one end or the other. And we're real live human beings, and we're in this neighborhood because it's a peaceful, quiet place to be. And so we will if this increase of traffic is not, the infrastructure is not in place, the neighborhood will bear the externalized cost of adequate access to the property. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to our next caller with the last 3 digits of their phone number, 406. Caller 406, if you would unmute. Hey there. Can you hear me,
Can you hear me this
406?
time?
Yes, I can. Perfect.
Yeah, beautiful. Lance Psycho, 825 Crispin Drive, number 103. I'm actually calling in to express my support for this project. I'm a pro-human, pro-affordable housing, and pro-market housing advocate in Longmont. And from city council all the way down to the citizens, and many of which we have heard tonight, we hear all the time, we want affordable housing, and we are tired of seeing homeless on the streets, and we care about our fellow humans. And I also heard that last gentleman speak about, I'm a human living here. What about all the other humans who want to live here as well, right? Should we be so elitist and protectionist that we do not support market rate housing, which will then ultimately, hopefully lead towards more affordable housing in Longmont? So either we're really for affordable housing or we're not. And I would just appreciate it if us as a community, again, all the way from the top down, city council, starting with the mayor, all the way down to the lowliest of citizens, either we tell the truth or we don't. And truthfully speaking, from my perspective, this is exactly the kind of development that we need in Longmont. As the architect spoke about, they are not over-densifying the property. They're only having a quarter of the property built with the built environment, the buildings. And I do actually think that the architect is making his best attempt to fit into the neighborhood, despite all the so-called architectural critics, of which I don't know of any actual architectural critics in Longmont, but suddenly we have a bunch. And the attempt is there. This is a great project. I would urge the Planning and Zoning Commission to not be like City Council or the NIMBY citizens and talk out of both sides of their mouth with, we want affordable housing, yet we're not going to approve stuff like this, and actually speak out of the one side of their mouth, which is, we want projects like this because it is going to lead to a better fabric for Longmont and ultimately more affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go on to our next caller then. Caller with the last 3 digits, 966. Caller 966, if you would hit *6 to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Hey. Hi. This
Good.
is Annie Cherniak and Brian Whitehead at 227 Grant Street. Wanted to express my support for most of all the prior comments. Main concern is kind of overflow parking into the neighborhoods, and kind of in my own experience as having lived in condos and having lower income living in my life as well, people use their garages for storage. It's kind of how it is. And so my question for Alex Gore, thanks for your renderings and your input and showing us the models. But how many spaces are you considering for each unit? So for example, for a 3-bedroom model, do you consider the in-unit parking spaces to accommodate 2 vehicles? Because and then also for the 2-bedroom units, do you consider the underground parking for 2 cars or for 1? I would love to see that breakdown. I think that would be helpful. But I also think it would be helpful to temper it with kind of observations that many of us have seen. I do applaud your attempt to keep the parking, within the units, but most, it's likely going to be storage. And I do think that the neighborhood is squeezed from the restaurant on Grant. The restaurant that's on 3rd Street, they do have overflow parking. And so I do think it's going to increase density. And then we've got tons of little kiddos on our street, and people
are going to be speeding up and down the streets. I'm curious as what type of speed mitigation devices might be employed just to keep those kiddos safe. I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Am I on?
We are going to go on to our next caller. Caller with the last 3 digits 059. Caller 059, if you would hit *6 to unmute. Oop, I saw you there, but I think it muted you right as you unhit it. Try that one more time. Hey there.
Hey there. I'm Kathleen. I'm at 133 Grand Street. I got a lot, so I'm going to talk fast. But I'm really excited about Alex's proposal. It seems like it's actually really thoughtful, which I'm super excited about. I'm definitely not opposed to change. I write grants for the State Historical Fund for Historical Building in Boulder. And so I'm curious if there would be a way to work with the developer to keep the Bond Farm, build the farmhouse and then also the barn and turn them into some sort of community space or something to retain that historical feature. You know, the neighborhood is called Bond Farm Neighborhood. It's named after this farm, and the Bond family was a pretty neat, significant family in Longmont's history. And so I was wondering if there's a way to do that, given that there are pretty decent tax credits. And yeah, I'm curious about that. I don't have a car. I bike everywhere. Spruce there's a blind corner coming up from Grant and Spruce, and cars go pretty quickly down there. So in addition to the traffic concerns, I'm curious about bike lanes and bike safety, as well as crosswalks for the little kiddos. I have a 3-year-old, and we walk to school every day or bike. So yeah, I'm curious about how that could play into the alleviating traffic concerns. I am also a little bit concerned about the height of the building. I don't have a totally great picture of it, but I live on the east side of the Bond Farm neighborhood, and I'm a little worried that the rooftop decks would just be looking straight down into our backyards, which would mean we would have virtually no privacy in what has, we moved here, we bought here because it's such a lovely, quiet neighborhood. And I would love to not have neighbors looking into our backyard. And then my last concern is with the drainage. I know we've had a huge flood here. I'm sure the architects are taking that into account. But that's another concern I had with the drainage on the south side of the property, that if there was overflow, would that be flooding straight into our homes on Grant Street? And then also mosquito mitigation for that drainage. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to keep on going to our next caller. Caller with the last 3 digits 309. Caller 309, would you please hit *6 on your device? Hey there.
Hi, this is Mark Danielson. I live at 251 Lincoln, which is on the corner of Lincoln and Spruce. I will echo just one more time what so many have said, that Spruce does not have the capacity to add another 150 cars every day. I understand, Lance, that it's easy to just call this NIMBYism. None of us that I know of are opposed to this place being developed. This piece of land, we all acknowledge it will one way or the other be developed. We want to see that it's done responsibly. And it feels like adding another 150 cars to a very narrow access road is not responsible development. It just feels like, I understand that this is a complicated approach, but if they were to create access on the south side, it would take traffic to First Ave, which is a wider street, which gets very little traffic. And most of the voices that you've heard this evening would be their criticisms would be silenced if that became part of the strategy. So I think you would gain a lot of favor if you were able to express how that could be a possibility, again, understanding there is additional cost involved. So traffic, number one. Thanks for the chance to weigh in.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our next caller. Caller with the last 3 digits 013. Caller 013, if you would hit *6 to unmute, please. Caller with the last 3 digits of your phone number 013. If you would please hit *6 to unmute. All right, we are going to come back to 013. Oh, there you are. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. Do you mind stating your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, this is Cheryl Swanson and my husband Kyle Swanson. We're both here on the phone. Our address is 187 Grant Street.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And we didn't realize this was going to be something we could ask questions and get answers. So what we prepared is a little different. We do have a lot of concerns. We have owned this house for 18 years. We are right on the corner of Spruce and Grant, directly east of the Bond Farm house. So that's right in our backyard. We are wanting to talk about the fact that the homes that immediately are adjacent to the Bond Farm property are all single family, single story houses, and they're all around 1,000 square feet. Our house is one of those homes. They were built in the 1960s. The rest of the houses in Bond Farm neighborhood are more around the 100-year-old mark. And I'm wondering, how does dropping a 75-unit condo complex, one that will tower over all of the adjacent single-story homes, how does that maintain and enhance the character of the historic Bond Farm neighborhood? We're very concerned about these 3-story apartment buildings with the rooftop, and it does not blend in with our historic neighborhood at all. These buildings will be 3 times taller than every single house that is adjacent to the property. And now my husband Kyle has a few more things to say.
So I saw that the green space that's being used on the development or the proposed development is on the west and south side of the project, where on the east side it has a much narrower buffer. So if these 3-story townhomes are much closer and they have a roof deck, I'm concerned about privacy as well. Are these roof decks facing into the surrounding neighborhood's homes? Because they are so much taller than every home that's adjacent to this property. And speaking, a gentleman had brought up affordable housing, which I think everyone is for. I'm just not sure how affordable are these homes going to be. I have a feeling that they are going to be more expensive than most of the adjacent homes to this project, unless they are designated affordable and subsidized in some way. And then, of course, the density with the cars and the traffic, a huge concern for all the streets surrounding it. That's it.
That's all we have.
Thank you both. Okay, we're going to keep on going. A couple more callers here. We are going to go to the last 3 digits are 523. Caller with the last 3 digits of your phone number 523. Please hit *6 on your device to unmute. Hey there.
Hi, this is Chuck Kernick at 239 Grant Street.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
All righty. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the presentation and for this opportunity. We really appreciate it. Just a couple of points to reiterate on the traffic. I too am a cyclist coming up Grant Street south of Spruce. That is a blind corner that's pretty scary sometimes. Also, north-south feeders onto Spruce that feed from the north onto Spruce. We'd like to see a traffic study on that. And then Sunset and the intersection of Sunset and Spruce, yeah, that's already pretty bad coming around that corner either way, either turning onto Sunset or coming from Sunset to Spruce. And so the other thing I'd like to talk about is, so Longmont has a climate action recommendations report. Part of that was around beneficial building electrification. So there's a beneficial building electrification plan that's going to be going to City Council on October 11th. And part of that is electrifying buildings. So most of our homes now are heated with natural gas. And so I'm just wondering if these homes will be heated with electrified heat, so heat pumps or whatever other method they might want to use. 75 additional units, that creates a long-term carbon liability because it's really hard to convert houses. Once somebody's got a furnace in place, you know, it's going to be 25 years before it even fails. And you've already got gas in place, they're probably just going to put another gas appliance in. And so I'm wondering if the developer is giving any thought to that. I also did read someplace that there was supposed to be PV on these rooftops. It looks like they've got rooftop decks. Solar photovoltaics. I didn't hear anything about that in Alex Gore's presentation, which was very good. Thanks for that, Alex. And then I'm also wondering if there's going to be any consideration to electric vehicle charging in the units. So will they have EV chargers or will they at least be EV ready? And that's all that I had. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. We're going to keep on going here. We're now at caller 578. Caller 578, if you would hit *6 to unmute your device, please. Caller with the last 3 digits of your phone number, 578, if you would hit *6 to unmute. Okay, we're going to move past you right now, 578. We're going to go on to caller 744. Caller with the last 3 digits, 744. If you would hit *6 to unmute. Hey there, caller 744.
Yeah, hi. I'm Chris Mills. I live at 207 Lincoln Street.
Thank you.
And, yep. And I just want to say a few things. That the traffic here is crazy. This is an escape route for those folks that don't want to go on Bowen. And I don't think it's going to get any better if you cut everything off and you actually add more traffic to Spruce Street. So I have about 5 things I'd like you to consider. One is consider entering from First Street instead of Spruce. Figure that out. I don't know what that means, but figure it out. Add some stop signs. I have asked for stop signs and speed bumps, and I've been denied every time. And I don't understand why it's so hard. But it is, apparently. Make sure there's adequate parking. And I heard that from I think her name is Catherine. But here's the deal. If it is parking that's not convenient, then they won't use it. And so we have parking everywhere. The other thing would be we look at some one-way access so that we don't have these crazy fast drivers, out where we are. And the other thing is during construction, nobody has actually talked about this yet, but you know, we need to have like, when are they, you know, when is it available for them to be delivering? And when does it stop? When does it stop? Does it stop at 4? Does it stop at 5? I mean, seriously, there's going to be literally an amazing amount of construction that has to occur. And I'm thinking about new now and not future. This is like, what are we going to see?
Okay, we are going to go on to our last caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 578. Caller 578, if you would hit *6 to unmute, please. Hey there.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. My name is John Pillman. I live at 1303 Spruce Avenue. And I'd like to make a comment, and a caller made this earlier. And actually, Jennifer, I think, even brought up the Longmont Comprehensive Plan. And I'm looking at goal 1.3 of the comprehensive plan, which says maintain and enhance the character of the established neighborhoods. Hopefully the previous callers have kind of, I guess, stressed how important that is to us, number one, but number two, that it doesn't appear this project does really anything to enhance the character of this neighborhood that was built at least 100 years ago, a lot of it. Spruce Avenue, the infrastructure north of Spruce, most of those homes are 100 years old, and this infrastructure is 100 years old. And then if you get down south of Spruce, those were built in the early 60s. But so I have a concern over that I think the city of Longmont is really kind of going against their comprehensive plan in this project in general. The other thing I wanted to ask is, as a question is, what's going to be the impact? So we talked about the impact just of the residents. What's going to be the impact given that I expect that given the zoning requirements that home businesses are allowed. So it's not just work from home, but it could be people that might be hiring up to 2 employees that might be coming over to this development to work. So it could be way more than 150 cars if there are other people that work in these residences as a home office during the day. The other thing is ADUs, right? So there are a number of ADUs going in around here, right? Which is going to further increase the density of this neighborhood. Is that being taken into consideration? Another one I've got is overflow parking. So we talked a lot about the parking, or a little bit about the parking that's going to be on-prem. But what about guests that come for Super Bowl? If you got 75 units, you could have another, 30, 40 cars coming over for various residences to watch the Super Bowl or whatever. Where are those people going to park? If it's on Spruce, you're screwed. People have made it clear, Spruce is already too congested, and it's already difficult enough trying to get around when there are 2 cars trying to pass each other on the street. And then the last but not least, and I think the previous caller brought this up, what are we going to do about construction traffic? Not just the traffic from these earth movers and all these other things that could potentially be going up Spruce, but also the damage that's going to be inflicted upon Spruce Avenue. I know I've lived in a neighborhood before where this happened. They actually charged the developer per trip for the eventual street repairs. So Spruce is going to get torn up, no doubt about it. How are we going to make sure that Spruce is repaired? And my opinion is the developer should bear that expense. And then I will say that I think a serious look needs to be put into First Avenue, South Entrance. If anybody's been down there, it's First Avenue is about 9 feet wider than Spruce and is very, very seldom traveled. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Jennifer and applicants, if you guys would like to come on and respond to any of those, we do still have a few callers that are remaining. Callers, after, if you hear something that you would like to respond to, we're going to have the applicant and Jennifer, they will respond to questions now. But if you do have something to bring up, just hit *9. That'll raise your hand, and we will come back to you for a minute for you to ask one more question or clarifying comment. And with that, turn over to you, Jennifer.
Great, thanks, Dallas. So I'm going to just touch really quickly on some of the issues that are really specific to planning processes that I heard. There was a question regarding the impact and tax burden on schools. Whenever we have a development application come in for residential development, we do a referral to the school district, and they provide comments on what the capacity is. And there are also fees that are assessed per dwelling unit, per new dwelling unit that go towards the schools. So there are ways that we address these impacts as part of our processes. There was a question about why the zoning was changed from the previous annexation. So the entire zoning, the zoning of the entire city changed in 2018. There was a citywide, the city's land development code was updated, and there was an effort to align the zoning districts with the comprehensive plan categories established through the Envision Longmont process. So with that, it wasn't a parcel specific rezoning, it was a area wide rezoning. So that's why the zoning changed from the original annexation. And it's a pretty analogous zoning district as well. In terms of the environmental site assessment, we do require environmental assessments to ensure there isn't any contamination. We do have a environmental sustainability planner who will take a look at issues related to that. So that is something we take a look at from just a process standpoint. Building height, this zone district as well as RSF, the residential single family. So residential single family and residential mixed neighborhood both have a maximum height of 35 feet. That's across the board. I would expect that the proposed units would fit within that. So that's from a regulatory standpoint. In terms of affordability, the City of Longmont does have an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires that either a set percentage of new homes within a development be set aside for affordable units, or that the developer pay a cash in lieu fee that would go into the city's affordable housing fund. So that is something that we do take a look at as well. In terms of home business impact, I'm just going to note that home occupations are already permitted across zoning districts. So that's something that we do have a citywide ordinance regarding. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the applicant to discuss their responses, and I will also have our traffic engineers pipe in terms of some of the broader traffic impacts that were asked about.
Mark or Brian, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can talk a little traffic real quick, and I'm sure later Caroline may address some more. Longmont has some pretty robust traffic impact study requirements as compared to other jurisdictions. I've been involved with this site since 2019, so I am aware of a lot of the considerations that everyone on the phone has discussed. And maybe just to give some confidence on the scope of this study, which we will discuss with Longmont before anything happens. Previous studies for this site have gone out to Sunset, Third, and Bowen in terms of scope of study. So I suspect that we'll be considering that range again. Also, we've looked at speeds along these roadways and mitigation for those where necessary. We've also taken a look at infrastructure that might be lacking. So questions about roadway widths, sidewalks, things like that. Those will all be considerations as we get into this, and as well as bike and ped infrastructure. So lanes, again, crosswalks and sidewalks, those sorts of things. But as Caroline mentioned earlier, we haven't gotten into the details of the study for this particular application yet. But there's been a lot of work previously done in that regard for this site. And so we will be taking a look at all of that again, I'm assuming.
So can everybody hear me a little bit? I hope so. Okay, good. So there was a lot of concerns. A lot of people were worried about traffic and density and that sort of thing. I think that it's important to understand that the underlying density, the underlying zoning that's been established out there is something that's been given a lot of consideration. Every 10 years and every 5 years, they update the comprehensive plan, which kind of dictates where the density is supposed to go. When we were making the decision to buy this property, that density was considered. You know, as Alex said, you know, we could have done 100 units, 105 units. We could have done them structured differently. We could have done like one large building, a number of things that we could have considered, but that's not how we like to do things. We like to do stuff that fits in the neighborhood. We felt that this was a good compromise, the 75 units versus the 104 units. The townhouse style rather than, you know, an apartment house or flats, condos on top of each other, which were actually part of the original Bond Farm plan, where they had a big commercial building up front. I thought that was very out of character. So what we've tried to do was we tried to design a project that we thought matched the neighborhood, matched the area, provided a good transition. There's always going to be transitions in zoning. As everybody said, the houses adjacent to this are 100 years old. Someday those will be redeveloped too. Someday people are going to move out and build new houses. Traffic was another topic that was really emphasized by everybody. Just heard the gentleman talking about traffic and doing the study. I want you to understand what the role of the developer is in regard to that. The city's going to mandate a traffic study. And they're going to ask us to consider certain things. We're going to hire an outside agent to do that study, who's then going to submit that to the town of Longmont. Longmont's going to review it and decide whether or not it's adequate or not. I don't get to put in stop signs unless they approve that stop sign, unless they mandate that stop sign, unless the code requires a stop sign. I can't put in speed bumps. I can't do anything to mitigate speed unless directed to by the traffic study and then by the city of Longmont. What I can tell you is any mitigation process that they ask us to do, we will do. Oftentimes, when a new development comes around, we become a conduit for the neighbors to try to influence the city through our process. So rest assured that if there's traffic mitigation requirements, we're not going to hesitate to do that. We'll do whatever we can to make this, compliant and good. One of the things that we try to do is we try to do affordability by design. What I mean by that is, sure, the city's got a program where you have to have a certain amount that's affordable. You have to meet certain standards for that. But by building this type of unit, we assure long-term affordability. So, we're not building a McMansion. People aren't going to be moving into a 3,000 square foot house or anything like that here. These are going to be size limited. And by virtue of that size limitation, they're going to continue to be affordable in a certain way. Some of the other things that I heard concerns about parking, another big one. What I can tell you is when we create the HOA, and there will be an HOA, understand that these are being developed as townhomes. That means the people who live there own the land under the townhome, whereas in a condominium, you don't own the land. You're just part of an association. We will have a homeowners association, and we will craft the homeowners declaration and the CCRs, the rules that govern the HOA. And we can mandate through those rules that they have to park in their garages, that they can't park on the street, that that, they've got a 15-foot driveway in many cases. And if you park in the 15-foot driveway, well, you're out of the way, but you might be encroaching on the sidewalk or something like that. So we can build into the HOA documents rules that'll help mitigate some of the concerns you have. So I would suggest, and we're going to put together a email address called 1313 Spruce at apg2.land, which will begin to take information and questions from people that we can answer personally. We'll also form a committee to help determine which of these concerns can be baked into the homeowners association, like no parking on the street. You have to park in your garage. You can't use it for storage. You have to park there. When guests can be there, when can't be there. And through the same email access, we'll also come up with some rules that we'll talk to you about when construction can occur. Is it 8 to 5? Is it 9 to 5? Is deliveries have to stop after a certain time? If we talk about all that in advance, we can easily bake that into an agreement with the community on how we'll manage the construction, so it doesn't aggravate any more than it has to. The last thing I think I wanted to talk about was we haven't made a determination yet, but I believe we've discussed the possibility that there would be no natural gas on the site. We wouldn't bring gas in for anything. We also discussed how we could put PV on the units. And the drawings that Alex showed you were just for an example. There's plenty of ways that we can make these houses dependable, affordable, and something that people want to live in. Give me 2 seconds, Alex. Do you want to say something? And I'll my notes and see if there's anything else I forgot.
Yeah, I was crossing a lot of things out, so I'll just kind of touch on the last remaining ones. One of the big concerns was Spruce Avenue, and our plan is not to adjust the property owners to the north of it, but to do the improvements on our side of the property, so that there would be 2 lanes that you could actually cross, and the parking would be outside of that. Another thing is each unit, and these are specific questions that I'm trying to cross off here, will have room for 2 cars within each unit, whether it is a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. For asbestos, if the house gets either demoed or removed, there is a strict process of regulations. If you're going to move it, you have to wrap it, you have to test it, you have to have third parties and then state inspectors, or if you're demoing it, you have to literally remove those with professionals who do that. So that is all handled to a very, very high level. As for the speed bumps and the speeding, I think this will come throughout the whole process with the city. I know on the last Bond Farm project, there was 1 to 2 speed bumps. So I would expect there to be 1 to 2 speed bumps in the future, just from experience too. The rooftop decks on the side where the houses are a little bit lower, they will be on the rear side facing into the project, not out of the project over those houses. They talked about convenient parking for it to be used, and I know Mark touched on a lot of this I crossed off, but that's why we interspersed it throughout the site, not just in one location. And those were the majority of the big ones that I could see. So I'll pass it back, Mark, and I think that's it from my side.
And the last thing I wanted to touch on that I didn't get it, I skipped, was a lot of people were referring to access to First Street. So our property is not contiguous to First Street. We do have an easement for utilities that runs down to First Street. That easement is not sufficient to move vehicles over. There's no way we can get down to First Street. There's a possibility, and everybody's been talking about it, and we've been talking about it, and excited to see if we can help bring it into fruition, is to create a bicycle and a pedestrian path that connects Spruce with First Street. And so that's a possibility. And if we can make that happen, we will. But I can't tell you that I can tell you that there's no way we can have vehicular access to First Street. I guess that's it. Anybody else want to say anything? If not, let's have staff ask if anybody has any other questions.
So Mark, one question that did come up was where you guys have done projects in the past that might be useful.
Sure. So I would encourage you to and you can Google it, Incarnation, which is in Wheat Ridge. We had an old carnation farm and we turned it into, this is a project that, Alex, did you design that? No.
Not that one.
No, there's another development now. So I was associated with another company, Urban Green Development, and that's an urban green project. That's something that I'd like to point out to you. And Alex and I worked together in those circumstances. And I was the guy who found it, developed it, put it together. And so I consider it mine. So you can look up Incarnation in Wheat Ridge. There's 1210 South Reed Street, Parkview in, yeah, Alex, you designed that one, right? Yeah, okay. And then Nobo in Boulder. It was called Sunita's Terrace, 18th in Yarmouth. And there's a bunch more. I'm struggling to remember it. I'll put that, if somebody's interested in send me an email to that 1313 Spruce at apg2.com, .land, sorry, apg2.land. I'll send you links to the projects that we've done.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask our engineering team on the city side if there are any, if there's anything they'd like to make note of, especially on some of the traffic side.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi. So, yeah, I've been listening in to all your comments. I guess to clarify a few questions, there were some questions about getting a traffic study on like the feeder streets. And I guess I wanted to explain kind of how we go about assigning traffic. So first of all, we have a trip generation manual that's published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They've been publishing them for years. And it gives us a lot of equations and graphs and things for trip generation. And that's, in this case, going to be based on the number of dwelling units. So we would be using a use like multifamily, low rise, or a townhome kind of use, and we would match that to the number of dwelling units there are. So that would be 75 in this case. And then we would, as part of the scoping process, the applicant's traffic engineer will develop kind of a trip distribution. So, X% of cars going west on Spruce, X% east on Spruce, X% north on Sherman to 3rd. They generally assume that people will be taking kind of the path of least resistance and not, circumventing and, making a lot of unnecessary turns. Obviously, that's something people could theoretically do, but we kind of have to start at like a baseline assumption. Also with, I guess lots of comments about parking. It is correct, Spruce Avenue is narrower. So it was built to an older standard. So we allow parking on both sides. That was now our current standard is you have to have like 34 feet curb to curb. So I don't know how parking is usually dealt with, like perhaps like the applicant was talking about, like in an HOA agreement. And I know planning has parking requirements. I don't know exactly what those are off the top of my head, how many spaces each unit is required to provide. But yeah, and we have
two per unit, but it is based on the number of bedrooms for multifamily.
Okay. So would it be based on like these are 3-bedroom units?
Yes. So essentially the 3 bedrooms would be 2.25 and the 2 bedrooms would be 2.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then also, like I was talking before, we'll have to scope with the applicant which intersections and roadway segments will get field counts at. So I know I heard some comments about Sunset and Spruce, which it was examined before. Obviously, like Spruce and Sherman, because that's like a site access, the other site access, and we'll kind of go through it and see which other ones might need to be included. Third and Sherman as well. So. Sorry, you're muted, Jennifer.
I'll say thank you. I think we've covered the concerns. Okay, looks like we have a raised hand.
Sure thing. So caller with the last three digits 059, caller 059, if you would hit *6 to unmute.
Hi there. I'm hoping you'd be willing to give me a little over a minute because I got an email from one of our neighbors who was locked out of calling in. And I also have a question. So this is a question for the city, actually. So Jennifer, Meredith says that the city funding, there was that $240,000 that had been allocated to the city park and the rest was unfunded. But she says, per the most recent Longmont Capital Improvement Plan budget just released last week, the funding for the park was entirely eliminated. So now it's unfunded versus partially funded, which is a big concern.
Yes, so
given that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. Let me let you finish.
Well, yeah. So I think that's one of the most appealing parts of the project is that park, and if it's going to be unfunded for 10 years like Collier Park was, that really detracts, I think, from the neighborhood to have an unfunded park. And my other question, this is my own question, sort of feeds into that. I had asked about the historical buildings. And I don't think I got a response on that. And so my follow-up question is that something that perhaps the Bond Farm farmhouse or barn, could that be moved to the park and become a public space there so that it's still actually on the Bond Farm property and we retain that historical piece? Would that be a consideration? And then I would love to hear from the developer about whether keeping those historic buildings would be considered at all. Thank you.
So touching base on the park funding, I did speak with our parks folks this morning about this, and the $240,000 it may not be showing up in the CIP, and Jim, feel free to pipe in if I'm misstating this, but that money is essentially set aside in a separate fund specific for this park. Is that correct, Jim?
No, it's wrong. Totally wrong. And I'll apologize ahead of time if the dog start barking while I'm speaking. So it's important to note in city budgeting, the current budget we're looking at is the 23 through, I think, 27 budget. It's a 5-year look ahead. There are a host of projects that are funded in this year, which is where that funding, the $240,000 sits. And each year we usually do a carryover. If funds are unspent, that's what would happen with this dollars. It's in a budget, it's in a project. It's just not showing up in the budget that City Council is considering, because that's the future budget for next year. And I know because I checked it this morning to make sure that the funds were still there, so Jennifer didn't look silly. But there is $240,000 in the existing Bond Farm CIP project.
Great, thank you.
Can you still hear me?
It's called PRO 149 is the project number.
Great, Alex.
Can you still hear me, or am I muted?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm curious if that $240,000 that's allocated, thank you for clarifying, that was really helpful. Is that going to be enough to build the park, or are we going to need additional funding to complete that project?
There would definitely need to be additional funding.
There will be additional funding. More than likely, that money is the beginning of the design of what we would be undertaking. And that would fall to our natural resources group that handles our parks improvements. So they would, as their schedules allow, be starting that. Could be starting it now, but construction and depending on how far they could get with it, depending on what they're going to do with it, would dictate how much they would need to spend for design. And then I would anticipate probably needing a little more. And then construction is the dollars that are currently unfunded.
So then is that something that there would be contingency for before 2027, or would that be something that in the next, we would be looking for funding the completion of the project after that time frame?
It's hard to say. What I could offer up is that we do budgets every year, and projects that might be unfunded in the 2023 cycle may get funded in the 2024 cycle.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the only thing I'd say is it's important, as they have done this year. I think we saw some people come up early in the process and speak about it and ask about it, and it has raised certain questions with council, and they ask those questions usually be answered before they'll approve the budget.
And I'm going to defer. I'm going to defer to the applicant team with regard to the historic buildings.
Great. So Alex Gore and I worked on another project where there was a historic building. We picked it up, moved it, built another structure next to it, put a new foundation in it, and moved it back. We have some experience with that. We don't have a use for the building. I did ask early on with the Parks Department if they had an interest in it. We had looked at having the park on the east side instead of the west side. The west side is more conducive because then we have a better chance of creating that pedestrian path down to First Street. But we didn't have. But the city indicated they did not have an interest in preserving the buildings at all. And so if somebody did want to preserve the buildings, we could certainly cooperate, help out in any way we can, but we'd have to find a new location for them. I don't see any way to incorporate them into the project as it sits. But if we have a new location, I'd be happy to participate in finding a way to move them.
Amazing. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Jennifer, it's up to you.
All right. Well, I'm just going to open it up and see if anyone has any questions after we end this meeting here in a moment. Feel free to reach out to me or to reach out to the applicant team. I can be reached by phone at 303-651-8439. Again, 303-651-8439. My email address is what you see on the screen without the hyphen. So Jennifer.Hewitt-Apperson altogether at longmontcolorado.gov. So probably one of the longest addresses on the planet, but that's how you get me. And then the applicant team has put together that general Q&A email as well. And if they would like, anyone would like to pipe in or follow up before we close out.
And that email is 1313 Spruce at apg2.land, L-A-N-D.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Dallas, is there anything else on your end that we need to cover?
That should be it. We're good to go.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks to the applicant team, and thank you to all the city staff who have been here to make sure we have the most accurate and complete information out there. So have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thanks. You too, Jennifer.